You're listening to REIA Radio, the nationally trusted name in real estate investing. We dig deep to discover investors' why in real estate. If you want to skip all the BS and get in investors' heads, you're in the right spot. Be one of the thousands to check out REIARadio.com.
We think different, and so we have to take the risks. And those can be difficult conversations with your spouse where you're like, yeah, you know that thing that I spend all this time on? And they're like, how much money did you lose? I'm like, well, 50 grand. They're like, why don't you get it back? I'm like, I don't really want to. So having to navigate that is important for an entrepreneur, and to not get wrapped up in your own failures, because without those failures, you wouldn't be on the path of success that you're on. You never would have started the path.
This episode is brought to you by Magic Door.
Magic Door is the AI-powered property management platform designed to handle everything from the rent cycle to the vacancy and maintenance cycles. During the rent cycle, Magic Door collects rent, sends automatic reminders, deducts management fees, and distributes payments to owners. In the vacancy cycle, Magic Door streamlines listings, tenant applications, seamless multi-language communication, screening tenants, and converting applications into leases with one click. And for the maintenance cycle, Magic Door's AI handles everything, asking tenants key questions, assigning tasks to vendors, and scheduling repairs automatically without you getting involved. With no hidden fees, no onboarding costs, and seamless AI-powered automation, Magic Door takes care of the entire property management lifecycle so you can focus on what matters most.
Welcome to REIA Radio, episode 168 with the Rich Lennon.
Rich is like, what did I just walk into with this podcast?
I'm so glad everything that was discussed before we recorded is not being recorded.
We got out all of the inappropriate comments before we hit record today. You're welcome, listeners. Stay tuned for the outtakes.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Rich.
Hey, cheers.
Happy Bourbon Day.
Every day's a bourbon day.
So, Rich, Midlothian, Virginia. Is that current? Did I pronounce that right?
Yep, that is correct. You pronounce it correctly, and that is, I still live there. That's exactly right.
Is that a suburb of Richmond?
It is. It's right outside of Richmond.
Look at me with research, hard hitting here.
Yes.
So, Rich, we've never talked live before, so I'm excited to hear about your background and doing a little bit of research on what you've been up to. It looks like I'm just going to give you a quick overview. You dive in with and correct me, or give some color here. So what I found was landlord, fix and flipper, wholesaler, lender, borrower, teacher. Anything else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I think that's
amateur chef.
I think that's that's the gambit right there. That's the full Monty.
Full Monty. Well, Ted usually does that at the end of every episode, the full Monty, but we're going to skip it today. Are you from the Virginia area originally? Is Richmond your kind of like home base?
Yeah, I've lived here for like 15 years.
Okay.
I lived in the D.C. area. I would say I grew up in the D.C. area. I went to Virginia Tech, so I went away to college and then came back. And I lived up in the D.C. area for about 30 years. So raised there, and I don't know, at like 35 or so, I moved down to Richmond because my wife told me to.
Okay. And is because my wife told me to. That's great. So
I think we can use that line with everything in life, couldn't we?
Pretty much, yes. Pretty much. That's all encompassing. What was your jam, or like what was your career before getting into real estate, or did you come out of the womb that way?
I've always been an entrepreneur. So my education is an engineer. I mean, I talk about pretty boring. I did a little bit of work for General Electric in the nuclear engineering program. When I mean a little, I mean a little. And then I just started opening businesses in my 20s. I ran a soccer club. So I was a soccer club guy for a good 10 years. It was great. I always equated it to like running a plumbing company where I would, sell out the hours of a soccer coach as a trainer, and then I would make the arbitrage on that. And
okay. So you weren't actually just like, I'm one guy and I'm coaching, 15 kids. You ran the whole thing and had coaches kind of rolling up to you. Is that?
Yeah. And I did individual coaching, but there's only so many hours in a day that you can coach, right? So you really capped on how much you could make. So I just made a business out of it. And I would go to like college soccer players and I would, pay them $25 an hour to come in and train the local clubs. So they would give me a contract like we're going to spend $50,000 this year on training. They would hire us, and then we would source the coaches to go and do the training. And I just kind of made the arbitrage, right? I paid them $20-25 and I made $50 to $70. And so I just took the spread. And I did that for a long time, for like 10 years.
Kind of backtracking. I didn't know that General Electric had anything to do with nuclear. Like, what were you guys doing with nuclear energy at that time?
Literally, I've been inside the reactors.
They got their own power plants?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they own the nuclear sites, or they do the maintenance on them. So literally, I was in there training on the cranes on how to pull up the rods out of the water in the nuclear reactors, and like you had to shuffle them around within the container. And so like you're in this massive crane, and they're like, "Don't lift it above the water level." And I'm like, "Well, what happens then?" And they're like, "Everybody dies." And so it was really inside a nuclear reactor, and I'm like, "I don't like run behind the lead shield. There's a little place over there." And I'm like, "Well, who's going to come get me over there?" And they're like, "Nobody, but you can live there until you have to stand up and like eat or whatever." But I decided it was just not for me. It just wasn't going to be my path.
Wasn't this what Homer Simpson's job was?
Yeah, basically. That's exactly right. Me and Homer have very similar paths.
Do you feel like your life has been shortened at all because of this career choice?
Or do you have any additional appendages?
Not that we talk about.
Wow, this is starting off with a bang here. Gladly, not literally, but so wow, nuclear. How long did you do that job?
Really not very long. It was in a program, maybe 3 to 6 months, and I was literally standing inside a dormant nuclear reactor, and I was on a scaffolding, and I was going through some exams. And I just remember looking up at this thing, saying like, "Man, this is not where I want to spend my life," and I didn't want to do that, and so I left the program pretty shortly after that.
I know we had a previous guest that did some nuclear stuff, and that explains so much now.
Hey, we're gonna hold out judgment until the end of the podcast here. But
That's right.
So so GE nuclear crane work and making sure the fuel rods weren't exposed to actual air.
Yep, don't do that. It's a bad thing.
Yeah,
this is how you work a crane for the first time. Oh, by the way, don't bring it up.
Yeah, don't
Hey, I know you just got out of college, but by the way,
don't kill everybody.
Start pulling these.
It was about that. It really was. It was about that level of.
No wonder they want to get rid of nuclear energy everywhere. We're all like, it's great, clean, and then it's good energy, but yeah,
until you all die.
You have a college kid coming out going like, "What does this button do?"
Okay, so you bopped around the DC area for a number of years. Sounds like. Did you So after GE, did you stick on the engineering kind of straight and narrow, or did you go?
No, I went to bartend for a couple years.
Yes.
That was,
we're old bartenders here.
Yep.
a surprisingly good use of my time.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I started some online businesses. I would describe it as I used to just direct Google traffic. And so we would build websites, and then we would try to predict what was going to be the hot thing in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Then we would build the websites and do all the SEO. And then like around Christmas time, if someone was like the Beanie Baby or whatever it was, then they would look it up. They would travel through our website. We would pass it on to Amazon, and then we would take a cut off of it. And I did that for a bunch of years.
Like, is that a viable business still?
Yeah, it's still a thing. This was in.
So you're like a funnel for basically an internet search engine giant.
Yes.
Right? So you're attracting basically traffic and then directing it to them.
Yep, that's exactly right. And we would like literally watch the Today Show in like February and March for the up and coming toys. And then we would do the SEO on all the toys, and then maybe 25% of them became hits, right? And so we would own the websites that the traffic would go through, and we just passed the traffic on. We didn't like fulfill anything. We didn't buy anything. We just had the SEO part, so people would find us online. They'd go to our website, then we'd get the code, and then they would go to Amazon. And it was good. It was a good business, but I just hated selling other people's stuff. Like I just didn't enjoy it. It was profitable, but I don't know. I just didn't enjoy it.
Oh yeah, that is so interesting, and it just blows my mind especially in the tech world, how there is like a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche, where it's like I never even conceived that this was an actual job or a business. And here you are, like you're an engineer and you're coming out and you're doing that and building a business out of it. I mean, just fascinating.
Yeah,
There's
totally
endless
random, right?
possibilities. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, so at what point did you get bored with engineering and decide to fall off the wagon and look into real estate on the dark side?
I gave up on engineering pretty quick. My mind is built like an engineer's mind. I'm very pragmatic. I do math well, and so I naturally fit an engineer, but it really wasn't a personal driver. Like I didn't find any personal fulfillment out of it. And I started to look at real estate in a more serious way, maybe like 2007, 2008. And of course, they were going through the crash at the time. And so we had picked up some, I call it accidental landlording in the DC area. And so we bought one house and then we didn't have to sell it to buy the next one. So we ended up with a property or two and then we rented them, but didn't really cash flow in DC. The price of the house just doesn't really work for that model. And my wife had an opportunity to move down to Richmond. And she came to me one day and she says like, okay, I remember all the things. I've known my wife since I was 16. And so she said, remember all those stupid things that I supported you with over the years? Like, yeah, I remember that. And so she's like,
where is this going? You were talking about when I was lifting nuclear rods?
Yes. And one of the reasons that she sold me on Richmond was that, hey, you could go down and you could cash flow in Richmond. And she knew that I was looking into real estate and trying to do something. And so that was one of the factors that determined like, hey, we're going to go down there and we're going to do that. And so we did. We moved in like 2010, maybe 2009, 2010.
Rich, should we be interviewing your wife instead of you? I feel like she's the brain
prettier than I am. So like,
how far is Richmond from the DC area?
it's about 2 hours. You know, it's not far as the crow flies, but going up 95 is a train wreck. 95 on the East Coast is that big artery that just goes up and down the East Coast, and it's always backed up and crazy. And so we don't go back very often.
Yeah, I have you been to DC before? You have a few times,
I chaperoned a youth or eighth graders up there a couple of years ago with my wife.
Yeah,
she chaperones a group up there every year for the last decade.
I completely forgot about this, but there was like this when I was in high school. I think I was sophomore, junior, something like that. They had like it was like National Young Leadership Council, some whatever thing they had back then, and I was I got asked to go
4 decades ago or so.
Shut up. I got asked to go to 3. Thank you. I got asked to go to Washington DC to basically do like it was kind of like debate and learn about politics and then tour the Capitol and the monuments and all that stuff and go to Congress and the library and all the things. But I think back to that now, like there's so much to do in DC and it's a great trip for kids.
It really is
those kind of things. But I could see I have a buddy that lives in I think like kind of rural Virginia. I can't remember the city or the town that he's by, but he's worked in DC for a while and he's an engineer too. He on the software side, so he does like database and that kind of stuff. But he had to get like national security clearance and that whole thing, and I've got a whole story about that. But yeah, DC is a cool place, but I like the fact that we're about to talk about cash flowing markets that are within basically earshot or a stone's throw of your hometown, because this kind of dovetails into conversations that we see all the time on various bigger pockets and a lot of other social media sites related to real estate, where people say, I can't buy here, there's no cash flow, or and blah blah blah. You hear that trope all the time where people just use that as an excuse, like, yeah, I would, but I can't so I won't. And but you're living proof that, like, okay, yeah, like all you got to do is just go a couple hours outside your market. I mean, literally, you can almost pick any city in America, and that's going to be proven to be true. New York, Massachusetts, like any of the coastal areas that are super expensive, you can go a couple hours and you can probably find a smaller town that will cash flow.
You definitely can. And you're looking for those secondary markets, but they absolutely exist for sure.
Yeah. Now, so you had a couple of, you mentioned accidental landlord.
Mm-hmm.
You ended up keeping a couple of properties that you originally lived in. Do you think that's a good method for people to get their, foothold into an initial step into real estate?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people enter the field that way, where they didn't anticipate that they were going to have that extra home. And a lot of people did that in 2008, 2009 as well, where they couldn't sell the home, right? So the equity went upside down. And so they just kept the homes and they had a decent interest rate. And as a result, they just became landlords by accident. And I was certainly one of those people.
You know, it seems like that's kind of happening now again, where people, you know, we had so low of interest rates for a long time that people are locked in and they don't want to move. And those that have moved, they're like, well, why be stupid to get rid of this 2.5% or 3% interest rate? So a lot of them are like renting out and they're biding their time. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what happens here in the next 5-10 years with the economy. And like, you know, there's all this inflation shock that we've had, notwithstanding other world events like World War III or whatever that could potentially happen. But so you have a couple of properties, you rented them out. What was next in your real estate journey?
I set off the goal to buy one house a year for 10 years. And that was my retirement plan. I was like, oh, I'll be just wealthier than all my friends. And I'll just buy 10 properties. It's a reasonable number. And that was the plan. That was the catalyst for getting into it. I'm a super competitive person. And so I went with the idea of like, okay, I'm going to buy one a year. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to buy two a year. And then I was going to buy one a quarter. And then it was one a month. And then it was one a week. And I just kept going down the rabbit hole until, maybe 5 or 6 years into the business. So like 2015, 2016 kind of era, I was buying 4 or 5 homes a month. And my strategy was generally to keep half of them and then flip half of them. And the flipping is what the family eats off of, right? Because rentals, particularly in the beginning, don't make you a lot of cash flows, I'm sure you're aware. And just paying all the employees. At one time we had 14 employees and, it was a big thing.
Dang.
How many units did you have to sustain 14 employees?
Well, it was really the volume of the flipping is what caused the ability to sustain the employees because you needed the cash. I definitely had triple digit rentals, and that has played out for me on a wealth growth really well, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so in 2020, I just stopped buying. I said, oh, there's a pandemic and I really hate construction more than I could ever describe to anybody. And I was like, I never don't want to do one again. And I just quit. I just said, okay, we let the 14 employees go. Now I keep 3 or 4 of them, because we do other things and someone has to manage their rental portfolio. And we do internally manage that. I still have some of the employees, but I got rid of a lot of employees and I got rid of a lot of the stress in my life. And ironically, I thought that I was going to be giving up revenue, but my most profitable years in my career have been actually since I stopped buying homes. So, yeah.
I mean, you were probably doing what, 30, 40 flips a year there?
Yeah, that's probably a fair number. Mm-hmm.
You're about in that same realm, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, so when we'll get into this because I have kind of some questions I want to dive into with the whole 2020 thing. But I was operating right around that kind of. I think we had a couple years where we did 50-ish, and then it was more like 30 to 40 was kind of like comfortable. We could do 3 a month, and that was not having much in the way of staff. We were still wearing all the hats, right? But
it's a lot of hats.
Yeah, it is. And like Ed doesn't like when I wear hats during the podcast, but whatever, I'm rolling with it. I have 14 of them.
It's a shadow on the face.
Yeah. That's my 5 o'clock shadow.
The witness protection program, right?
That's right. So when you had, all right, why 14 employees? I mean, that's a lot. By the way, I did a little research, or we were talking about kind of like your background. We looked at your LinkedIn profile, and I noticed your last entry was 5 years ago. By the way, you need to up your LinkedIn game.
I spent my entire career, really until about 2020, trying to not let anybody know who I was. So I bought everything in land trusts.
Researching you wasn't easy.
Yes, and to today, thankfully you can't find anything about like my assets and what I own. And I fell in with a group early in my career that really preached that. And they were a product of the 2008 to 2009 collapse, where the banks came after everybody and it was like total chaos. So when I really started buying in 2010 and on, I was taught by the only people that were left, right? Because it wiped out 90% of the people in our business. I was taught by the people that were left, hey, never trust the banks, and you need to hide all your assets, and don't ever let anybody know what you have. And so I just spent a lot of my career not letting anybody know who I was. And so when you say I haven't been on LinkedIn in 5 years, I'm like, I would have guessed 10, but I never did that. I never sought that out, and it served me well.
I just have a VA do it for me.
Well, speaking of VAs, when you there were several posts on your LinkedIn profile from 5 years ago about hiring VAs and VAs are the way and all that. So that's where I'm going with this is the 14 employees that you had were those in person, like they were in Richmond, or were they virtual assistants, or like what was your mix?
There's a combination of the two, and most of my staff and today all of my staff is in the Philippines. And I had a method for hiring people that it worked very well. And briefly what it was is I created an online scavenger hunt. And so I would post cryptic messages on the boards in the Philippines of like, hey, if you want a good job or whatever, and then they would go on a link, and then like they would read what is basically a job posting, but like 3/4 of the way down the job posting, it would say, totally ignore everything else in this posting and go to this website. And that's how it started. And so they would go from one website to another website. I had them watch videos. I would quiz them on the videos, and I created an autoresponder situation where I didn't even have to manage it. They just automatically went, but I deliberately made it very complicated. And the idea was that we would have 200 people at the beginning of the funnel, and then whoever made it out of the funnel, I would hire them. And so we had about a 0.5% conversion ratio. To get through the funnel, you had to be very detail oriented. You like really had to pay attention. You had to overcome I'd be like, hey, on a 30-year amortization schedule at 7.5 interest, what would be payment number 184? And I wanted someone who could understand what I was doing in the business. And when I interviewed them, I always was curious. I was like, man, why did you do this? Because there's no guarantee of money. Like, why in the world did you follow this super complicated thing? And the answer was always the same. And it was, I was curious where it was going to go. And so I had an employee that was curious and was a natural problem solver, but was very detail oriented. And those are the only people who made it through the funnel. And so my best employees always came from the Philippines because I was never able to accurately replicate that for an American workforce. And I
feel like we want to do it just to see if we make it through.
This is the coolest thing I have ever heard. And when it comes to hiring somebody, I'm not kidding. Like I was in recruiting for years and years and years for tech companies for like 20 years. And I've never heard of anything like this before. This is so freaking awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Where did you come up with this idea? Like, who put this idea in your head?
My guess is there was bourbon involved, and
as all good things start.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I had another buddy who was another engineer, and we were sitting around, and we were, hey, how do we find the right person? How do we find the right process to make this happen? Because as an engineer, I'm a process guy. I have good process, a detailed process. I think it's important. And we just kind of riffing off each other, came up with the ideas and spitballed it back and forth with each other for a while. And then, we each came up with our own process, and it worked out very well for both of us.
So you wanted somebody that was basically creative, curious. They took alternative routes to find out information that you needed. They were relentless in basically their efforts. And that bore out. It reminds me of, I don't know if you ever saw this. It was kind of a young adult movie, but it was Ready Player One, where you had to solve these, these really complex puzzles, and you had to work through a lot of different, ways of getting there and think outside the box and all that stuff. That is fascinating, man. Like I could tell your engineer brain probably went to work on the nuts and bolts of it all. That's really cool and really innovative.
And we wonder why so many real estate investors are engineers.
I know, right?
I mean, it comes up over and over again.
Yeah, that is the thing for sure.
That is super cool, man. So okay, so you get some employees on board. All of them are, or it sounds like most of them, or all of them are based out of the Philippines. Well, how do you decide what you want them to do for you? So you were cranking out 40 to 50 homes. It sounds like you were kind of like keep one, flip one, keep one, flip one, ish, depending on cash flow needs, I would assume. And the benefit of having that many, support staff in a location that's outside the U.S. is the cost isn't as high as you would have to pay somebody here with fully loaded benefits and all that. So you probably were able to keep your expenses down. Why 14 though? And did all of them work full time? Like, are we talking about 40 hours a week times 14?
Yeah, that was one of the requirements on my side, because I wanted to be able to offer someone a good salary and something they could build a life around. That was important to me. I said, hey man, you're going to work 40 hours a week because like you're going to give your whole life to my business and I'm going to compensate you for that. And I don't want you to split your time. And so that was one of the criteria of like, hey, it's got to be 40 hours. And I don't pay per hour. I pay on salary. So I don't track your hours and stuff like that. And it worked out really well. Why so many is like, it was all the verticals, right? So in the business, we had the acquisitions vertical, the dispositions vertical, the marketing vertical, the financing vertical, the property management vertical, the project management vertical. And so you'd have a manager that would be responsible for each one of those verticals. And depending on what their vertical was, they might need someone to be working for them. But I certainly did not want 7 direct reports coming to me.
Yeah, that was going to be my next line of questioning was like, how did you manage this bag of cats with 14 people? But it sounds like you got a manager to manage the staff.
And she's still with me today. And so when we downsized, we, in my opinion, kept our most talented employees. And she's been with me for, I bet it's 10 years now. She lives in the Philippines and, she's built a whole life around our business. And she's got 2 degrees and she's got 1 accounting degree and she's like speaks 4 languages. And like, these are the type of employees that you can get. And I pay her after 10 years of advancement. I still only pay her. I hope she doesn't see this. I only pay her $10 an hour. And then I give her like a Christmas bonus as well.
You mentioned salaries. What salary did you pay most of your staff? So
we started at $6 an hour. So everybody comes in, they start at that salary. We haven't hired anybody in a couple of years, but we bring them in at $6, which is a good salary in the Philippines, but not great. And then we allow them to be able to advance. We do have one employee that I think earns like $5 an hour still, but for the most part, we pay him $6 an hour.
Gotcha. Have you ever been to the Philippines?
I have not.
No, I was just wondering because like, wouldn't it be awesome to go there and with like you could go there with like $5,000 and just live like a king for a while. I mean that would be kind of fun, I would think.
Throw a party for your VAs while you're down there.
That is exactly what we were going to do. In 2019, we had started hey, I'm going to go to the Philippines and I'm going to rent a mansion and then everybody can just come and we'll do like I'm a big traction guy, so I did traction for a long time. And so I said we should do our yearly level 10 meeting in the Philippines and just get this big mansion for 3 or 4 days. And I was able to do it. I was going to be able to fly everybody in because like the Philippines is like different islands and people are all over the place. But we had a budget. It was going to be like $10,000 to like rent the place and fly everybody in and do all that. It really was not expensive at all. I was going to pay almost as much for the flights over there as I was going to pay for making it happen in the Philippines.
Oh, that's so cool.
Then COVID came around and kind of wiped it out.
Yeah. So we'll kind of come back to that, but I wanted to maybe peel back a layer here and say, okay, you were flipping that many homes. How? Like, how did you start and how did you build up your processes? And like, maybe if you wouldn't mind delving into that a little bit, and I'll ask you some questions along the way, but like, how did you acquire that many? How did you handle the contractors? And those are kind of the things I've been thinking about here because I'm remembering back to when I was getting started. And it's a lot.
Well, I would say that it wasn't always a smooth process. I'll start with that. And I think that your ability to buy houses is all relation to your deal flow. And so deal flow is the number one thing. And so when I got going in 2010, 2011, you could go to the courthouse steps and you could like just pick them. At that point, you could go to the HUD home store and you could just pick them. And
HUD home store was a great spot.
Yeah, you could just like, I'll take that one.
As a real estate agent, I used that all the time back in the day. Now there's nothing on there.
Yeah, there's nothing on there, right? And so I think it started to disappear around 2014, 2015. And so we really converted to direct mail marketing. So I have I have tried every marketing tool that you can for trying to find a distressed seller. And I just settled ultimately on direct mail because I could do it from the Philippines with efficiency. And it was easy to like get the list, like go to whoever we're buying the mailer from and set the schedule up. Like all that can be done from the Philippines. When I was trying to do like text calling and cold calling and all that stuff, like it didn't work very well. I didn't like it. I didn't like the negativity about it. So we just ultimately settled on direct mail, and we went with volume, and we just sent a bunch of direct mail.
If you don't mind, if I kind of like dig into some details here.
Yeah,
So
go.
direct mail, and you're not doing what we're talking about like currently, correct? Like this
I'm
is
not.
okay. So I'm not going to steal your secret sauce.
No, you're good. Yeah.
So, okay. So Richmond, give me a rough idea of the MSA population.
About 1 million.
Okay. So it's about the size of Omaha where we live. So this will be useful, I think, for our local listeners anyway. Okay. So 1 million population. How often and how often were you sending out mail, and how large of a list would you pull? If you wouldn't mind kind of like breaking that down a little bit, because this is where people that are really active in the business and maybe they're just ramping up and they're like, I want to scale. This would be really timely, I think, for them. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So our direct mail went out every Friday. So we would spend the week building the list, and then we would send it out on Friday. And we went after like every list that there was. And so our budget on a given month, we could spend upwards of sometimes $15,000 to get all the mail out. So you're talking a lot of mailing pieces. And so coordinating that is a little tricky, right? Like, am I mailing to the same person? Am I doing it on the right schedule? And nowadays, I think it's a little easier with some of the software that is available to investors, but we had to do it with Excel spreadsheets. And so, that was like multiple employees' job was just kind of run that list. And, I used all kinds of different mailers, but I'll tell you the niches that were most effective, and it probably isn't a surprise, is the pre-foreclosure market and the tax sale market. And that was definitely a big boon for me. And I'll tell you people how I did this. You have to do, like, if you're doing an absentee, you're 80 plus years old and you own the home free and clear and you live there for 20 years, you can send that person a postcard. They'll take the postcard, they'll stick it on the refrigerator, and maybe 2 years later they call you. And so you can do that. But, in a pre-foreclosure market, everybody wants that lead, right? It's the most saturated one that there is. And so we came up with a very clever mailing piece for that. And so we would take an envelope, but like think of the envelope, it was like made out of wrapping paper, like a Christmas wrapping paper. So they received this envelope in the mail that was just this weird thing. And then we would handwrite a letter in there. So I had someone in the States that would do the handwriting of this letter. And we said, hey, we know it's a stressful time. We called it the Lifesaver campaign because we taped a lifesaver to the letter, and then we posted, and then we taped another piece of the bubble wrap, the little bubble wrap things that you pop. And so we would say, well, hey, we know it's a stressful time. For me, sometimes I like to have a lollipop, or I like to have a lollipop to help me with the stressful time. And if it gets really bad, I just pop these little things. And man, people would call, they would call laughing. They'd be like,
that is so clever. That is really
got 40 mails. But yeah. And it was our way of standing out. And like, so a mailing piece like that might cost me $2, but in an environment where everybody's going after it, you got to find a way to stick out. And we were highly successful with that.
How were you, when somebody reaches out to you and like, hey, I want to get started in this, like, what advice are you giving to somebody for that initial budget to get going? I
would say that pick a niche and stay with it. And then don't expand to other niches until you've mastered the one that you're on. And I would also encourage you to get on a niche that needs to make a quick decision. And so, yes, an absentee owner that is 80 years old and owns it free and clear, like that's a good one, but they might not sell for 3 years or 5 years or whatever. And so the things that add the artificial timeline, it's going to foreclose next week. That's a good, like they're pressed. It's going to be up at the tax sale that they're pressed. And so I would encourage people to find that niche and then find a way to differentiate themselves in the niche. Because there might only be, like, on a given, now in Virginia, we always used to be able to calculate the equity. We'd be able to, okay, you bought it 10 years ago, you're paying this much interest. And then we did a calculation saying, okay, we would just eliminate people who didn't have enough equity. And, maybe that wasn't a good thing because we left subject twos on the table, but we were looking for cash buyers at the time. And, there might only be 20 of them in a given month that really fit your criteria. And it only cost us $20 per mailer, or excuse me, $2 per mailer. So the budget's only like $40. So it's not a high budget thing where you're blasting out $10,000 a month. Like, we were spending way less than that. And, but just be highly targeted at a niche and find a way to stand out. We sent people cakes at times. We sent a guy a cake once. We had it, hey, we've been trying to reach you about your house. I don't know what that cost, like $30, $40. I don't remember. And he's like, dude, you sent me a cake. I just want to see if I could eat it. And you're not trying to kill me. And you're just trying to elicit that kind of stuff.
What in the world? This is great.
Are you getting your list through companies like PropStream, or what are you using?
I don't remember when PropStream came out, but I never really used PropStream. I always went directly to the data sources. And so at the time, we used to literally get the newspapers, and we would go through the newspapers and say, okay, these are the foreclosures. Nowadays, you can go to, there's some national websites that do a pretty good job of tracking the foreclosures for you. And that was part of having that staff of, like, we would go get the data, because I always wanted data that maybe no one else had. Another way to do it, we had someone always going through the probate portal in the local counties. And so when someone would pass, and then they would, bring they would put the trustee in there, then we would be notified. We could find it in the records, and then we'd pull it out. And we always felt like, hey, that's probably something no one else has.
Now, are you putting all that into like a CRM system, like a RE Simply or something like that?
I used Podio. And you mentioned mistakes earlier, and then they're like, oh, what are some of the mistakes? I'm like, well, I was really good because I was the engineer, right? And so I was really good at processes, and we built out like a really robust Podio system that worked really well for our business, that ran all this stuff. And so it didn't just act as the CRM for the client, but like it also acted as the property manager. It operated as the project manager, and we just did a whole bunch of stuff with it.
Podio, from what I understand, I've never implemented it. I know several people that have, but I would just say you have an unfair advantage with an engineering background and understanding how the software systems work together and how you can customize things and so forth. But I like
Podio's complicated.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Like I've never personally integrated it into anything, but I've heard it's highly customizable, but it's a lot of work. You need to have somebody that knows what they're doing to do it. Man, this is such a good deep dive into this. And so we had Tom Kroll on probably about, 5 episodes ago ish. And do you know Tom? I know, like,
Tom's a great guy.
Yeah,
he's great.
Rich is on because of Tom.
So Tom Kroll talked also about like really zeroing in on one marketing channel and making it like you own it, right? You are all in on this and you're going to master it, as opposed to like just throwing stuff to the wind and seeing what sticks. So you mentioned tax delinquents and pre-foreclosures as kind of I need help now, or I'm in trouble now. So they have a higher likelihood of catching a life preserver, which could be somebody that's going to come along and buy a home before it gets foreclosed on. Did you also like layer on, say, online marketing? Like I know you mentioned when we were originally talking, SEO was something that you focused on. Was that a big component of when you had your business, dialed in, when you were doing a lot of marketing?
I wouldn't say it was something that it was a rabbit hole that we explored, and I've explored almost all the different types of marketing channel. And I really encourage people to find the ones that fit your personality. And so, like, for example, I have not had my phone on for like 4 years. Like, I literally just like, you cannot call me. Like, my phone is off.
That sounds so awesome.
It is awesome. But it fits my personality of, I don't want to be bothered. And so, like, for an online PPC campaign, what I found is like, there's like a 30-second window, because then they're going to go to the next the PPC thing, right? And so
That's true.
like my phone's not on, so like I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to know about it for days. And so, and I wasn't able to outsource that piece of it because the people in the Philippines could not understand the intricacies. Now, at one point, I had acquisition people; they were employees, and they would go out on the sales calls and they would go out and get things on a contract. And that made it a little bit better, but I just didn't like the immediate response thing. And another one is like I'm a Gen X, and so texting, while it is nice, I don't love it. And so like any text campaigns required me to get on and have a communication on the text, and I just didn't like it. And so I would ignore it. And then it just ended up being wasted money. And so, I really, for me, I had to find something that fit my personality. And some people are like on it. Like some people crush pay-per-click and some people crush the texting, but it just didn't fit for me. And so I wasted money finding out that it didn't fit for me. And that's just part of the process. So you're not going to nail the marketing all the time. It is a process, and you're going to find out what works for you.
Rich, if you get back on the dating scene, you're going to be a really lonely man.
I was not expecting that.
just saying.
I like my peace and quiet. I do.
Whole new
world. Peace to me.
Oh
I
man!
remember last time I was single, which was like 14 years ago. I remember I was trying to have a conversation with the girl I was gonna have a date on, and she'd only text me, and I'm like, call, nothing, immediate text, and that's how it is nowadays.
Well, that's funny
because all my single buddies are like, nobody talks on the phone.
I didn't realize texting was even around 14 years ago. I'm sure it was, but that's when I used to have a phone where you had to hit the button 3 times to get it like a T.
Oh yeah,
or whatever.
I had the
T9 thing.
I had the touchscgen BlackBerry.
Oh yeah,
that was awesome.
I had a BlackBerry, but it wasn't touchscreen. Even it was a flip phone. Wow, we're old. Gen X forever.
This episode is brought to you by Timber Creek Virtual.
At Timber Creek Virtual, we don't just keep your business running, we take it to the next level. Our virtual and executive assistants handle all the everyday tasks so you can focus on what really matters, growing your business. Need clarity on your financial performance? Our expert bookkeeping services keep everything organized so you always know where your business stands. With our seamless transaction coordination, you never have to worry about the details. Just close the deal. We've got you covered with cutting-edge digital marketing, proactive lead generation, and expert acquisition management. Plus, we handle the cold calling and messaging too. Let us handle the big C work so you can handle your business. Visit timbercreekvirtual.com/services and see how we can make your business soar.
So I love this, man. And I know you're not doing that piece of the business anymore, but what you learned and what you just dropped as far as knowledge on this, I think a lot of people will understand and grab a hold of, and that they can really get some good ideas out of this. So I personally, and I really resonate with what you said about finding marketing channels that fit your personality, because I also don't like when people just randomly call me. I don't like that at all. You're supposed to text me and ask permission to call first. That's kind of how I roll. Not that I don't want your text either, but I'm just slowly on the path of becoming a grumpy old man.
Yeah,
You've been on that path for a long time, bro.
but no, it's funny though. And I look at your business and my business, and I'm a Gen X guy too, and I got started around kind of the same time you did. So this a lot of what you're saying resonates with me. I got started buying, at foreclosure auctions, and I bought REOs. That was my whole jam when I first started. And then it transitioned into direct mail, and then eventually got into more PPC and SEO stuff. So that was kind of my marketing channels mainly were online marketing, and which I still do, and which I don't love, but I do it anyway. Because honestly, and a little soundbite here, the only reason I'm still doing that is because every once in a while I'll get a lead that comes in that ends up being $100,000 or $60,000 profit, or where I'll pay for an entire year of marketing with one deal. And that's the only reason I do it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because I still don't like it, and it's expensive, but the direct mail thing, I hit pause on that a little while ago. This is actually, maybe we could bring this up too. So I've gotten, I don't know about you, man, and it sounds like you had people handling the phone calls I did not. So I had the bat phone, like I would get all the calls.
Don't you still have the bat phone?
I do. I got a new bat phone actually 2 days ago. The direct mail thing, I have gotten so many like really hate calls or messages. I had this one lady, and I have no idea who she was. I've never talked to her before, but she would just call and leave these just horrible messages. She's like, "You must be stupid, 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 because I got a third letter from you." And she had this drawl, right? Like she would call me once a week and leave this voicemail, and I'd recognize the number, and I'm just like, God, I can't wait to hear it. And I tried answering a couple times when she called. I just wanted to see what she would actually say to me, and then she hung up on me. So I just let her go to voicemail every time. And that was the most hilarious one. I may still have it saved somewhere, but she was like, "You must be stupid, stupid, stupid."
Can we play it in the outtakes?
Oh yes, that would be great if I can find it. But anyway, what are some of? Do you remember any? I know it's been a few years or whatever since you've done it.
Yeah. I mean,
what are some of the worst calls you got?
Rich is like, oh yeah.
And real quick before you get
no
into
hesitation at all.
I want to illustrate something. For those of you that don't market, like let's say you're an investor and you just buy off the MLS or more traditional means. What we're talking about is people get mail from like us, and they get pissed off for whatever reason. They're just like highly sensitive about somebody wanting to buy their house. And like, how did you get my information? And like, they get mad. They're like, if I wanted to sell, I'd call a realtor, not you, you scumbag. And
I like the stuff they write all over the envelope.
Yeah,
and then they send it back.
Yeah, they send it back. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of that too. So, what if you wouldn't mind, maybe share one of the like, what are some of the funny stories you've heard?
Yeah, two stick out to me, and one was a woman, and she wrote a hand letter. I sent her a yellow letter at the time, right? Because back then you could just send a yellow letter and people would call you.
Yep.
And she hand wrote something back to me and then mailed it to their return address. And it was like, "You loser who just preys on all the people that want to sell their house." And she drew pictures. Like there's a picture of a house and it had smoke coming out the chimney. And she's like, "You must think I'm the biggest idiot." And she drew a picture of a person. And like this woman spent at least an hour on this letter. And it was actually, when I got it, it really shut me down for, I would say, months. Like I didn't want to do direct mail anymore. I was like, wow, is this who I am? Is she right? And so she really affected me. And by sending that letter, and I kept it. I have it framed somewhere, and I kept it. But it's a reminder to me of like, you're just not going to make everybody happy. And we would take her off the list, and then she'd get back on, right? Because you're always building that list, and she'd get back on. I got to know her a little bit. She was an older female real estate agent who owned a couple rentals, and she had a bunch of equity. And she resented the fact that I wanted to buy them from her. And because she's like, "I'm an agent, I'm going to sell my own stuff." And so she just couldn't understand my business of like, well, I could take you off the list, but then you're going to end up because like whatever. And so I couldn't get her, but it really affected me for a while. I was afraid to answer the phone for a while. And so I had to kind of mentally get through that. I had to push through that. And then another one that was memorable to me, I had a gentleman who he left a message. The message was over 3 minutes long. He only said 2 words. It was F you. And he said it in every imaginable. He was singing it. Like he was like, just like in this baritone voice of like, F you. And like, he would go like, he would rap it. And then like, it was like 3 minutes long. So, and I still have that recording somewhere as well. And
if you guys want some thick skin, go work at a car shop. Like I worked at a maintenance shop for a handful of years, and I was a service guy, and I would get the calls. I mean, nobody would ever want to come see you. You don't go to the repair shop because you're happy. You had to call with bad news every time.
Yeah.
And it was always like, my fault. I'm like, it's not my fault this is going on. And then you just get yelled at and reamed at, and then they'd come pay, and then they'd yell at you and ream you. And like, nothing about that job was positive. And I'm a very uplifting person, I think. And that job brought me down. It made me drink a lot.
Hey, cheers to that.
Cheers.
That's right. Yeah, cheers.
Oh, that is so funny. I mean, not funny. And I would say, dude, I resonate with what you just said, because I had somebody really like light me up one time, and it was like, I'm like, look, I get it. You're not interested in selling your house off market. I understand. Can we get past that? I mean, like, it's just direct mail. Like, do you call Domino's Pizza all pissed off when they send you a coupon that you don't use? I don't want Domino's Pizza. Like, you are going to call and yell at them? Because they were like emphatic about like, take me off your list and blah, 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 and all this. And I'm just like, after I hung up, I was like, you know how you get kind of like amped up a little bit, like your adrenaline's spiked, your heart rate's up. And I'm just like, why am I doing this? Like, this is stupid. Like, why do I keep subjecting myself to this? And I just took a breath, and I was like, look, I probably caught her on a bad day. Normally she probably doesn't react like that. It was probably something else that happened in her life. This is just a nothing burger. And so I kind of rationalized it in my head, like, it was not the right time to get that postcard, and she's probably not my right, or that letter. She's probably not the right audience for it anyway. That's what I always hated about outbound marketing, is like, you never know what's going to come back at you, because the clapback is just like so unpredictable. They could, like, we've had people show up at our office before that got a piece of mail from us. And by the way, I spent a ton of time like reworking my copy and how I wrote the letter and the verbiage in it. And it wasn't the cheesy, like, call me now, like your house is in pre-foreclosure and you're in danger. Like, I know that works for some people, but like, I'm not like that. Like, I'm like, we're, professional home buyers, and we always sent like a typed letter with, full color, our logo on it. And it was like, that was our jam. Like that. I know there's a lot of different flavors of this, but that was always how I wanted to approach it, is like, and I would always put verbiage in there, like, this may not be the right time for you. Totally understand it. You may have somebody in the industry. I was like putting all these disclaimers at the bottom to keep people from yelling at me. That was basically the only reason I was doing it. And I would still get them. Like, people just like fly off the handle at you. And I was just like, you know what? I'm fine. If you need somebody to yell at, just, I'm good with it. I know it's not me. You're just mad.
I think I just like really would want to go right to their house after being reamed. Like, I'm gonna go face to face with them right now.
I tell you what,
I've fix this.
I've had some conversations that have made me really upset, and also others that have made me feel like just bad about what I was doing. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, yeah, maybe. Like, after I hung up, I was like, am I doing the right thing, Mom?
Yeah, it'll make you think about it. I would get some of those calls on the pre-foreclosures because I would send them a piece of candy. And they're like, I'm losing my effing house, and you're sending me a piece of candy.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a lifesaver.
It was lifesavers. Exactly right. And
maybe next time we do the tropical flavors, and then he'd be like, I didn't send you the regular.
It was the mint one. We always did the mint one. We did the white mint ones. That's what we did. A lot of times they didn't know what the foreclosure process was. And I would explain to them things. They're like, I'm going to have to be kicked out of my house next week. I'm like, actually, if you lose your house in foreclosure, there's a process, and they're going to have to go down and they're going to evict you. And, you're going to have at least like 90 days to get out of there. Like, you don't have to take your sofa out this weekend. And then they were like, oh, and then I knew they weren't going to be a client.
Yeah.
I would take a minute to be like, okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this process so that you can go to sleep tonight.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because you get instant credibility when you can talk somebody off of a ledge that is apparently super mad at you, even though you are not actually the thing that they're mad at, or the person they're mad at. Because generally people get really upset when they're confused or they don't know the solution to a problem. Yeah. And if you're able to come in and describe something that helps alleviate some of the concerns they have, you are no longer a threat. And that's what they view you as. And you're kind of a whipping person, that they can go out, because they can't call and yell at the bank that's foreclosing on them, right? Because they owe them money. Like, they know that. So they're like, they feel probably guilt, shame. And then you're shining a light on that by saying, hey, by the way, I'm a random person that knows you're getting foreclosed on. And that's probably super embarrassing for you. So they're then turning around and lashing out at you. And you're like, hey, listen, I get it. You're going through a tough time. All I'm doing is saying, like, and I know you don't want to sell to me, and I get that. Let's put that off the table. Here's your options. You may not realize this, but you don't have to move out today. Like, they're not going to come and change the locks on your house the day of the foreclosure. Like, by you explaining that and taking the time and saying, hey, look, I know I'm not your guy. That's totally fine. But XYZ, here is your options with your situation. that goes a long way, man. It's goodwill in that situation, and I think that will pay it forward a long term.
I also think it builds a natural connection. Like, people just want you to be real with them.
I've gotten
and get the same level. Like, hey, you feel me, you understand my problem. I mean, you're going through that process with them, you're breaking it down, and you're kind of getting that same wavelength. You know what I mean? Where like they really feel like you're out there to help them. And sometimes that I think that'll put a little bit of something on their heart to actually make them feel like you care.
I find this particular topic is so interesting because there's the human dynamic to it, and anytime you touch people with marketing, it can just end up in a wild situation.
Yeah, you don't know where it's going to go.
All right, so Rich, let's talk about 2020. So 2020 was a freaking weird time, man. I was super gung-ho about flipping and wholetailing and transactional real estate. I was like making it rain. My business partner and I, we were marketing like crazy, and then all of a sudden the world stopped. Talk about maybe you alluded to the fact that you're not really actively like doing that much transactional real estate now. What changed in 2020 other than the obvious?
I would probably still be doing the same thing had the pandemic not come along. So it certainly shifted my perspective. I had achieved the things that I wanted to achieve prior to 2020 in terms of the financial. Like you set goals, and you have some audacious goals at the beginning, and then you kind of achieve those. And so I had the luxury of having had that success. And so when 2020 came, and like we're literally just sitting in the basement with the family, I was just like, hey, I don't really want to do all this anymore, and I don't want to be responsible for all these people. And I just said, okay, I'm not gonna buy any real estate, and I'm just gonna shut it down. Now that's not something you just turn the switch and it turns off, right? You have inventory, you've been doing the marketing, and it really takes you an entire year to like really shut it down and get out of it and get out of that.
Plus you had the 14 people working for you too. I mean, I'm sure you thought about a lot about that. Like, can I still keep some of them? How do I keep them? How do I afford them if I'm not cranking out, transactions? That's not an insignificant thing, right?
Yeah, you had to find a way to do that. And so we were definitely not going to be able to keep all 14 of the employees. They were all doing things that really we no longer needed. And, I think that your business character comes out there a little bit of, you have to make sure that those people who served you so well for so many years that you do right by them. And otherwise they won't help you shut the business down, right? Because you're like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. And then they would, if you didn't do it right, they would scamper out and just go find another job. And you can't blame them for that. Sure. And so we had to manage the exit of the employees as well as the exit of the business. And it was certainly a whole thing. And it was a review of like every month of like, what subscriptions are you because you don't need everything anymore, right? And so you're just slowly getting rid of all those expenses until you get some type of homeostasis in the business. And that was also a time where tenants did not have to pay rent. That was like in Virginia, they're basically like, yeah, you don't have to pay rent and you can't be evicted. And we may or may not give you this government funding. The government gave Virginia billions of dollars, and then Virginia sat on the money for 6 months with no communication. Like we didn't know what was going to happen. And so it was a whole thing to try to make that work, and knowing our books. And if anybody asks like, hey, what's the one thing of success? It's knowing your books. And by knowing our books, and like we could really close our books every week, we were able to intelligently exit. And it took some time though, a lot of work.
I think about times when I've had to make really like pretty severe pivots in business or just life in general, right? And I kind of liken it to if you're walking around and it feels like there's a really sharp rock in your shoe, but you can't stop and take it out because of whatever, right? Like you're in traffic or there's just like not a good place to do it, but it's always there and it's there and you remember it. And it's a really tough decision that you have to make. And you just kind of are like, this is going to be a whole thing. I got to find a place and stop and take my shoe off and whatever. Maybe that's just a bad analogy, but
I liked it.
Thank you. And Ted, he's
I liked it.
It was a perfectly delivered line. It was
It was perfect.
But you get the analogy. But it's something that is really something that you have to rip off the Band-Aid after a while and just say, this is what we're going to do. It's a tough decision and it sucks because we've been comfortable operating the same way for a while. And then if you do a really hard pivot, or if you just say like end it, like that sucks. I mean, you're affecting people's lives. You're affecting your own life. You have to explain things to a whole bunch of, groups of people. And it's like, that's a hard pivot. When you decided to do that, like what was next for you? When 2020 happened, you saw the writing on the wall. What happened in the rich world?
So the money started to pile up, because when you're running a business like that, you have so much money out. You got 20 in this deal and 30 in that deal. And you're at any time you're in 30 or 40 deals. And so as you begin to shut it down, the money begins to stack up. And so the first thing I started to do was I started to lend. I'd been building my IRAs and doing a level of lending for a number of years, maybe as early as like 2013, 2014. So I built those up a little bit, but I really deployed a significant amount of cash over like a fairly small period of time, called 6 months. And then I had a little bit of time and I really began to analyze like my wealth. And I said, okay, pat yourself on the back for 2 seconds. You accomplished the things that you wanted to do, but like, what's next? Like it's in me. And I mentioned before, I'm super competitive. So it's in me of like, okay, I set a goal, I make the goal, and then I just move the bar. I'm like, I gotta go farther. And what I realized is when I really laid out my wealth and started to look at it, a significant amount of my wealth was in equity, right? I've been buying all those rentals and some of them I'd had for as long as 10 years. And so I started to do some analysis of my own wealth. And it really came to light that a huge portion of my wealth that was in equity was really only getting me something like a 5% return. Right? Like the Burr model is like, oh, you create infinite return. You do for exactly 1 day. And then, okay, now I made my $30,000 worth of equity when I refinanced out and got my money. Now that $30,000 moves over to wealth. And so now if you're earning $6,000 on that rental and you have $30,000 worth of wealth, that's a really good return. That's 20%. I mean, anytime you can move your money consistently at 20%, do it. But as the appreciation and the pay down on the mortgage went, now that same house that's earning $6,000 has $100,000 worth of equity. And so every day that the equity grows, your wealth grows, but your return on wealth shrinks. And I just kind of came to that realization. So I made the pivot because originally my plan was like, I'm going to own 100 free and clear. And that's my plan in life. Okay. And like, that's a good goal. It served me well. But as I became more experienced, smarter, I don't know. And I realized, okay, the money parked in the equity is a bad thing. And that if I really want to grow, I need to find another way to do it. And so I started to liquidate the portfolio in 2021, 22, and I've been doing it through 2024, and I'll probably do some more in 2025.
Do you mind? I'm sorry to interrupt. You mentioned kind of in passing earlier, like what was your portfolio size when you like started at liquidating things?
Probably over 100 at the time. I had bought and then resold, and then to be honest, people sometimes ask me like, what was the portfolio? And I don't really know because we were buying so many and selling so many. I don't remember what it was, but it was over 100. It wasn't 150.
Were these all single families, or did you have some multis in there as well?
I have some multis, but they are duplexes and triplexes, and 1 or 2 quads, I believe. So and I have some small buildings as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you started unwinding the portfolio. You had some excess cash as a result of the equity that you had built up from buying smart and rehabbing and basically turning. Actually, let me clarify. When you held your portfolio, like the rentals that you have in there, did you buy them and basically say, okay, what kind of calculus did you do to decide if you wanted to keep it for a rental versus a flip? Actually, I didn't anticipate asking you this question, but I think this is a good way to go.
It was cash flow. And so it was over a certain price point, I didn't like the cash flow. And early in my career, that price point was around 150,000. It's probably greater than that now, just with inflation and what people are paying for rents. But at the time, it was around 150. So if it was above that, I just didn't want. I learned the business in 2010, 11, and 12 from all the people who went bust in 2008, 2009. And so like cash flow was king, and that was what it was all about. And that was definitely my mindset on that decision.
Isn't it interesting? Because I had the same approach in that you and I are, it seems like we're similar age. We got started at similar times, and we we started in real estate at similar times. But that was drilled into my head back then, was like, it has to cash flow. And you hear the 1% rule bandied about like everywhere, right? So people, from real estate agents to lenders to investors, they'll be like, oh, it hits the 1% rule. But back then it was the 2% rule, because I was on like Bigger Pockets was my life there for a little while. Like I was reading literally everything on there. Anybody that posted anything that was valuable, I read it. And there was a guy there from Ohio. His name was Mike OH. That was his handle. He did a study, like an exhaustive study on the actual operating expenses for operating rental properties, and he did it over a large number of units. And he said the operating expenses over a large number of units are going to equal about 50%. So you have a portfolio, that's where it's going to land. It's going to be somewhere between 40 and 60. On average, it'll be 50. And that's how he operated. And he said, I need to make 2% return on every investment that I make, not 1%, which is what everybody's, saying, oh, nobody can get 1% returns now, but 0.8 is pretty good, right? Like it's not, it's business, right? Like So everything I underwrote back then during the great financial crisis was it had to meet the 2% rule, or at least very close, or at least I could rehab it to a point where I could get it that close. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Wouldn't it be fun to find Nate OH on and bring him on?
Mike, yes.
Mike OH, sorry.
Yeah, I think he just dipped out. Like he's, he's like Rich here. He's off the radar, man. Like he's like,
he won't answer his phone. Why won't I answer his phone?
Yeah. So, okay, let's dive into lending. You found a good alternative for plowing your money into real estate, which, arguably is kind of an illiquid asset. Lending, why go that route? What did you find attractive about it? What give us the pros and cons, and maybe like talk about your journey.
Yeah. So the returns are the number one reason. So my internal rate of return on my money is between 30 and 50%. And I can deploy that money at a pretty good scale. Like it's probably deployable up to about 10 million. And so it just absolutely crushes the rental returns that I was getting. I also really liked about it that it wasn't a lot of work, and that when I was doing deals before, like when I would purchase it and I would go through a closing, there would be like a 8-month grind to get that house either refied or get it flipped out or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Now, as a lender, you still do that grind, but you don't do any of the work. And so there was really, an hour or two of origination. And then on the backside, there's an hour or two of like, hey, is the payoff correct, and making sure all the books are correct. Now, if you're doing draws in there might be a little bit of work in there. But what I loved is that every time I walked into one of my houses as a flipper or the landlord, whatever was there was my problem. And what I loved about lending was if I would show up at a job site and like someone wanted to draw or something, and I'm like, oh, the HVAC guy didn't show up and the HVAC guy's not in. I just love the fact that I could just walk away and be like, all right, that's your problem. You just give me a call when it's fixed. And I just didn't have to do anything. And it gave me the lifestyle that I wanted, combined with the returns that I've grown to really love.
Now, you guys have obviously had to grow a business to be able to have the money to be able to do the lending side of it. But hindsight, don't you wish that you just did the lending and didn't have to worry about anything else?
100%. Yeah, like I talk about this a lot with a couple of friends, and yeah, I'm glad I got through real estate, but holy shit, there's so many like struggles with it that you just don't see on the lending side. Would you agree?
I would 100% agree with that. And
like it's so much better.
Yeah, if I had started with like say $1 million, or like 100,000, 200,000, whatever, I would have, it wouldn't have given me what I needed at the beginning when I needed revenue and I had to support the family. But once you build it up to a certain spot, if I could have skipped a lot of the effort, I'd have fewer gray hairs and more hair in general.
But you wouldn't be the successful lenders that you guys are, because what you learned in those processes has made it so you know what you're looking at when you're giving that money out.
That's very fair.
That is very fair. And okay, so I want to ask you this too, Rich. So do you, I think in researching your background, it seemed like you're a local guy. Like you don't lend or operate outside much of your Richmond and the surrounding area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, if you can capture like a captive market in your area and lend on assets that you know and understand and you know the values of, and you don't have to even walk through them to know exactly what they are, that's a huge advantage. If you and I were just starting out, Rich, and we said, hey, we don't know real estate, we haven't been in it, but we're starting a lending company and we're lending on like flips, can you imagine? Like if you did not understand them or go through them yourself, like I don't know how other hard money lenders do it, honestly, because I look at the stuff and I'll see a rehab, scope of work that somebody submits, and I'm like, so you're going to do all of that for 10 grand? Like you're going to rehab an entire house for 10 grand? Are you freaking kidding me? That you don't know what you're doing? Like that is such a cheat code with being able to underwrite deals, is just like understanding the costs.
Yeah.
Now, regarding hard money, so you mentioned that you kind of pivoted into that. You had some equity in your rentals. You sold a lot of your inventory, or do you still have some?
I do. I still have what most people would consider a lot of rentals.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very non-specific, and I'll leave that alone.
Remember, I spend my life not letting anybody know what I'm doing. So
I know. And the
some
interesting
people are like, I have this. I'm like, I don't really want to talk about that.
Got it. Okay. So an unspecified amount of rentals out there, maybe a lot, maybe a little, depending on who you are. Okay, without getting specific, do you do a fair amount of volume of hard money loans in your Richmond and surrounding area, or do you just kind of cherry pick them?
No, I would say at any given time, maybe between $7 and $9 million out. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And okay, can I ask you this? What is the going rate in your neck of the woods? I'm not trying for market penetration here.
Oh, no.
Company.
There's more business than I can handle. So anybody who wants to come into the Richmond market is welcome. I'll have a cup of coffee with them and we'll be friends. But I lend at 13% and 3 points for 6 months.
Yeah. Hey, we're operating on the same like that. That's very close to what we do. We're usually like 2 and 14 or some flavor of that. Depending on outside of the Omaha market. Omaha is weird. Like we're a weird environment where people freak out over points. They're like, whoa, you charge points? No, thanks. I'm going to go get a 22% loan.
Right.
And like, no, I'm not kidding. Like that's legitimately happening. Maybe not so much here recently, but yeah. Anyway, so hard money, like now are you loaning out only your own capital, or have you started raising money? Like how deep into this are you going, or is it like your own stuff? And
that's a great question. So what I do is I lend and then I arbitrage off of other people's money as well. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to say 13 and 3 for 6 months. At exactly 6 months, that is 19%. But for most of the loan length, I'm just going to use the number I lend at 20%. And so what I'll do is my average loan is just under $200,000. And so I'll just use the $200,000 figure. And I remember I'm only a hard money lender because I'm moving my own money. So I'm not interested in like taking the points or commission. I have no desire to do that. So what I do is I take $100,000 of Rich Lennon's money and I take $100,000 of what I call lazy money. And so the lazy money are the same people who used to lend me money on my flips. And I used to borrow that money at around 10%. I stopped flipping and all those people are like, well, you're a big jerk. You won't move my money anymore. So what I did was I said, okay, well, I'll find a way to use your money. And so I combine the money. I do a fractionalized note to both people in first position. but my lazy money gets, let's just say 10%. It's all negotiable. Sometimes it's less, but let's just use easy numbers. It's 10%. So now the borrower is borrowing at 20%. I return on my $100,000. I get the face value of the note, which is 20%. Plus I get the arbitrage of the lazy money because I'm only paying them 10%. So I pick up their 10%. And so now on my $100,000, I get a $30,000 return, which is 30%. And if I'm feeling frisky and then I'll put in 50,000 and take 150,000 from lazy money. And then that arbitrage ends up being around 50%. And so in a given time, let's just say that I'm moving and I'm not moving this much, but easier numbers, 10 million, 5 million will be mine and 5 million will be lazy money. And so my rate of return on that, on my 5 million is about 30%. And so that's what I do.
So do you have any partners in your stuff? Like, you seem like a fairly private guy. Do you have any partnerships?
I'll do a one-off partnership of where I'm in this deal together with someone. I don't mind doing that, but I'm very much lone wolf, and that I don't want too much input from a bunch of stuff. I certainly have some people that I know, like, and trust that I do these types of deals with, because all my money is weird because it's in different buckets, and I have like at least 25 different IRA accounts, right? Like HSAs and Coverdell's and 401ks and Roth IRAs and, everything that you can imagine. I've got one for myself and one for my wife and one for all my kids now. And I've got inherited Roth IRAs.
The end of your tax bill's got to be crazy with your
It's
account.
insane. Like it is insane.
I'm guessing you're eclipsing the $20,000 mark a year just for the accountant.
Oh, the accounting. Yeah, it is. I do pay a hefty amount of money. Yeah.
All right, man. Listen, so by the way, we could do like part 2 or part 3 or part 4 of this, because I have so many questions that we could dive into on this. But in the interest of Friday afternoon, when you're listening to this, it'll be a Wednesday. But we want to get you out of here. So do you have anything that hasn't gone well? Because it sounds like you're kicking ass all across the board here with hiring Philippine VAs, 14 of them, shutting down that business, transitioning to hard money, over 100 rentals in your past. You've flipped 40 to 50 houses a year. You have anything that hasn't gone great?
In a section that we famously call Failing Forward. And this Failing Forward is brought to you by JM Real Estate Capital.
Hi, it's Rob, JM Real Estate Capital. We're the money guys that you need to know for all your real estate investments. Talk to us. We can do what your local bank can't or won't do. We don't have millions, we have trillions with a T to lend. 844-WE-CLOSE or go online, jmrecapital.com. That's jmrecapital.com. JM Real Estate Capital, smart solutions for the real estate investor.
There's so many mistakes and so many times that I lost. Some of the bigger ones have been when I really just get outside my lane and just like, awesome, I'm feeling more confident with myself. And I'll give you an example. I was very good at the automation and Podio. And I would show people, I would meet around with my friends and I would show people like what the automation looked like. And it was really impressive to them. And they were like, wow, this is amazing. You should write a Podio for real estate investors and put it in a box and sell it. And I was like, that's a great idea. So I became a software engineer in like developing Podio at mass for other people. And that was wildly unsuccessful. And
really, because that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I thought
honestly.
so too.
Like I would hire you. Like if you were like, I've heard of what Podio can do for real estate investors, and I'm like, if you were my solution for that, and I could just be like, hey, Rich, can you make this happen and just let me know what I have to pay you? Like that sounds like a great solution for me. So what went wrong?
It was a couple of things. One would be like you could do it at a high price point. Okay, $50,000 would come in and like now you can set up someone's Podio. But we were really trying to do it at a much smaller price point, $100 a month or $200 a month or something like that. Yeah. And people wanted us to run their business for them and really make all those things. And they gave me like $100, and I'm like, that ain't gonna work. But what the real issue was a technical one, and that the way that we built it, we hired consultants to come out and build it for us in a way that we could put it in a box. And then when we went to distribute it, it didn't work on the technical side with Podio. And if you told me why, it was like had to do with the workspaces and our ability to transfer it and allow someone to use it in their own space was fundamentally wrong. And so I was like, okay, I either have to rebuild this whole thing or I have to punt it. And I had spent 6, 8, 9 months, I don't remember how much it was, at least 50 grand in developing it, and forget all the other sweat equity that went into it. And it was just a total loss. And I was like, I want to do this anymore. And then, cause it affected my other business that was making money, cause when I'm distracted by this thing over here, now my real business, which was buying homes, really suffered. And so, I just punted it, and it was super valuable though to go through that experience, because it's taught me, like, chasing squirrels is the way we refer to it, is like we're just chasing the next squirrel. And so I tell people that that's the thing that taught me how to shoot the squirrel when it runs across my path. And instead of chasing it, I just get rid of it and I just keep moving.
So in the end, are you using that product for your own business today?
No, we don't use it because we don't, like, when we wound everything down, like we didn't have the desire for the workspace. And eventually, like, one of the line items that got cut in a meeting was Podio. And then we were off, and then,
Interesting. All that investment, and we'll just turn that off.
Yeah, but you have to. And I don't regret it. I've learned that as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are this way, we think different. And so we have to take the risks. And those can be difficult conversations with your spouse where you're like, yeah, that thing that I spend all this time on. And they're like, how much money did you lose? I'm like, well, 50 grand. They're like, why don't you get it back? I'm like, I don't really want to. So having to navigate that is important for an entrepreneur, and to not get wrapped up in your own failures, because without those failures, you wouldn't be on the path of success that you're on. You never would have started the path. And so, yeah, it was very impactful for me in ultimately a very positive way. But in the moment, it kind of
It's
sucked.
kind of getting into some of those properties that, just need to go, and you're going to take the loss, get them off your plate.
Yeah, exactly.
We've had those conversations so many times.
No, yeah, it's the 80-20 rule. Like, you have to rip off the Band-Aid on the bottom 20%. But I would applaud you for pursuing something. Like, there's something to be said for, like, there's a fine line between, chasing squirrels or shiny objects or whatever, and exploring things that could potentially be like a moonshot. Like,
Yes,
that could very well have. I mean, what you were saying to me before you got into the difficulties, I was like all in. I was like, yes, you fulfill a need. There's a void in the market for somebody that can do that. I could see how somebody that could go into that knew how to automate Podio or like make it work. Like, I don't know how to do that.
You had a client ready to go right here.
Yeah, if I was just writing a check, I'd be like, yes, tell me what you got. Like, show me the money, and I would write you a check. But like, you went down that path. So I would say that was a feudal enterprise worthwhile exploring. And now you've doubled, you came back and you recognize that. But life is so short. It sucks that you can't pursue so many of these things, right? That seem interesting and fun and maybe worthwhile or not. But like, you only have so much time. So you got to like double down on the things that work.
yeah. And I've done a little bit recently, angel investing, where I'll buy like parts of other companies. And I normally buy in for that like $50,000, $100,000 level is like normally when I buy in. But it is comforting to know, and it makes it easier that I have lost the money in the past, and that I know that it's recoverable, and they don't all work out, and then you just take the big picture instead of the little picture.
So in your experience in doing that, I've invested in things and deals that went to zero.
People.
Yeah, I've invested in people that went to zero. How do you rebound from that and say, like, you don't say, I'm never going to do that again, but you just say, what did I learn from that, and how can I move on and make a smarter decision next time? I don't know if that's a fair question, but I ask myself that all the time. Like, why did I do that? Well, I did it because at the time that made sense, and I trusted that person and what they were describing to me. So you have to give yourself grace if you make mistakes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've learned, one of the big ones I've learned is I don't tell my spouse anymore. And then I used to commiserate and I'd be like, oh, I did this really stupid thing. And then my wife, I've known her since I was 16 and she's amazing, but she's not an entrepreneur. And so like the things that like would tie her up mentally, like I just want to kind of blow off some steam, but it would stay with her. And so I had to learn to like, I had to carry that burden myself. And it's also a burden you can't share with your neighbor. You can't be like, yeah, I just lit $50,000 on fire last weekend. Like, it's not something that everybody can relate to.
That is hard. Yeah.
I just had this conversation with Jason Dries on a coaching call. And the conversation was literally like, I'm like, I need somebody to talk to about these challenges that I'm facing. You know, my partner, my wife, is the person that I can tell her everything, but I also can't tell her everything, because it stresses her the hell out. And then when she gets that news, then she thinks less of me and what I'm doing. Yes. Even though I might be still the breadwinner and bringing, doing success, but, we're not on the same wavelength. So, I need to find that person that's the outlet. Usually it's Owen, and, that I can discuss anything with, specifically in my business, because your spouse is not always that person, unfortunately. And I praise the people that have those people in their lives that can have those conversations, but they're usually, they're co-business owners, kind of like the Foleys, friends of ours. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's tough. It's a tough road.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where you have to ask them, like, do you want me to be a problem solver here, or do you want me to just listen? Like, do you need to get it off your chest, or do you want me to like jump in with some advice? I've made so many mistakes with my wife over the years where I've now learned, like, sometimes I just need to just completely shut up and not say one word, even though I really want to. I mean, I'm on a podcast, for God's sake.
Eats
like,
at you.
I obviously don't mind talking.
It eats at you though.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's such a hard thing to quantify, because so many people are different in how they like, analyze problems and deal with them and like life situations. So, good stuff.
Rich, the content we've gone over has been very rich. And so we appreciate that.
God, he did not just do that.
I did. I thought it was fun. But it's time to get to our favorite segment, which is the OT with Owen and Ted.
You're going to get OT with Owen and Ted, presented by PropStream.
PropStream is one of the most trusted real estate data software solutions. PropStream benefits all real estate professionals. You can find properties and contact homeowners on the go with PropStream's mobile app. We offer free academy courses tailored to real estate investors and agents. Take advantage of our live webinar demos to learn the software and scale your real estate business. Visit www.propstream.com and sign up for your 7-day free trial to get more leads and grow your business.
What up, rookie? You want to be old fashions or what? What's the deal here?
No, I did not know what you were doing.
You didn't know anything? I was transitioning the OT. No. Okay. Well, it is the OT with Owen and Ted now.
Okay.
And this is our most famous section of our podcast. It is critically acclaimed as one of the most popular areas of all podcasts in the world, actually.
Yep, that's true. Don't check the facts on that, but yes, you heard it here first, folks.
Okay. Owen does present the first question.
So he's lobbing it over to me all of a sudden.
Totally.
All right, here we go. All right. So Rich,
it was so organized up until now.
Right. Yes. Okay. So the title of, or the topic of, your first book is going to be.
It'd have to be something about all the mistakes that I made, and that all those mistakes are things that you have to power through.
Failing Forward by Rich Lennon.
Yeah, all the stupid thing Rich Lennon did, and he's still standing. Something along that line would probably be a pretty good book. I have quite a few stories.
I'm Still Standing with Rich Lennon.
Oh yeah, I like that. I'm Still Standing by Rich Lennon. Ooh, I like that. I might steal that one.
Royalties would be appreciated.
Maybe there's a Lennon out there that could do a little song for you about that.
Oh God, I'm sure he's never heard that before.
Rich, you have a podcast coming out. What's it going to be called?
It's called Growing the Money.
Yeah, you started recording yet?
We have. So we've recorded 5 or 6 episodes, and we're going to launch we keep pushing it back, but it should be early December.
Nice.
And, we are early December. Okay, so it really should be late December because we still haven't pushed it out yet. And it's really just my journey of how I grow the money. I love that topic. I love the game of money. I don't ever spend my money, which is another problem with another discussion. But I love to grow it, and I like to understand the taxes. I like to understand all that, and I just love the topic. And some of my my better friends we get together and we just talk about, hey, how do we make money and how do we grow money? And so the podcast was kind of born from that idea.
So you got a genie in a bottle. You're rubbing it, and that genie says you can have anybody in the world on your podcast today that's alive. Who's it going to be? What's the one question you want to ask?
Ooh, okay. So I hate to be a cliche here, but it would be Elon Musk. Yeah. And we didn't talk about
Elon comes up a lot.
Elon, and the questions I would ask would be like what his vision of, because he's in that unique position now, and I'm a huge AI person. I mean, I'm a geek on it, and I love AI, and I'm kind of deep on that rabbit hole. But I really love to hear his thoughts on how do you get rid of that huge bureaucracy, and that translates to our own businesses. Like, how and when is AI going to take that leap? Because it's almost there, and it's going to really happen within the next 2 years. And Elon, in this administration that's taking over, is the one that's going to drive that. And so I'm sure that the efficiency, the Doge, right? And so they're going to make the government efficient, and they're going to now have one of the world's leaders. He's built the best AI computing power, and that he's going to be like intimate in making those changes. And I'd like to know when those changes are going to occur and how he envisions them unfolding, for the sole purpose of me finding a way to take advantage of that and grow my own money.
So next question for you. When AI finally kills us, we are at your funeral, Rich. It's very sad. Who's going to give your eulogy, and what do you hope they're going to say about you?
I would say, just a cliche, but I have a couple friends I would hope that would step up and do that. And I hope that they would have a light sense of humor about it, and that they would understand that I recognize that I was just passing through, and try to do what I could, and never really took myself too seriously. And therefore, you should not be at my funeral taking life too seriously. That we're only here for a small amount of time, and make the impact that we can, and then be okay with what happens next.
It's time for a party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drink some bourbon.
Yep.
Drink some bourbon.
Yeah, old fashions are on Rich at his funeral. That's for sure.
Yes. We pull out the good stuff for the funeral.
Yeah. Well, you got the 12-year going, so I think you're doing pretty good right now.
I like this Wild Turkey 12. I don't know if you've ever had it, but it's
never had it. I would try it though.
What's the proof on that?
Oh, it's a good question. I bet it's pretty high proof. Only 101. Only 101. I would have thought of a little bit higher.
Yeah, I figured 112 at least. If you look at your life in whole, what mentor has had the biggest impact on you overall? It can be business or personal. Let's give them a shout out, and how they impacted you today.
I would say I would nominate Quincy Long. Quincy Long is a custodian for an IRA Quest. He taught me a lot of the business structure and a lot of the tax strategies that I've learned. He became a very good friend. He got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and so I've had to kind of watch him deteriorate over time, and to watch him do it very gracefully, and to watch him take that journey has certainly impacted me on a maturation, me just maturing. And so he was very impactful to me on the business side, but then he became a friend, and then watching him struggles. And Quest Trust Company was just originally basically disbanded by the Texas Department of Banking. And so to watch my friend who taught me all this stuff and who was really responsible for a lot of the wealth that I've built, to watch him go through this personal struggle with Parkinson's and then be tagged on with Texas banking system just really ripped him apart. And to watch how he's handled that and his graciousness and his fighting spirit to keep moving on has been very inspirational.
Rich, that is deep, and it actually makes me just think about, if you were going through something like that, I'd come visit you every week, buddy, and check on you.
Okay.
But that is deep, and I appreciate you sharing that.
All right, Rich. Last question for you on this official docket of questions that we have here is, are you looking for anything in your business or life right now, or are you good? You pretty much got it all figured out.
No, I mean, I'm always, I'm always striving for something. I'd like to grow my lending business. I'd like to.
Now you lend in the Richmond area specifically, right?
Yeah, Richmond, Virginia.
So hard money loans, that's kind of your jam. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I do prefer private money, and people ask me the difference at times, and I tell them, I said, hey, my terms and my paperwork and maybe my processes might mimic a hard money lender, but I think the difference is it's my money, and then the private money lender is the person I can make the decision, and you're not dealing with some big bureaucracy. It's me and when I do answer the phone, you can talk to me.
So that is really cool. And all right, so anybody listening in the Richmond, Virginia area that needs a private lender, reach out to Rich. And Ted, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us, and shout out to Tom Kroll that put us all together. Really appreciative of that, and great conversation. I mean, almost 2 hours of talking, and get to know you, and I appreciate it. And if you guys listen to this the first time or the 168th time, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite format. We really appreciate it, and that's how we get back to the community. But with that, Owen Dashner, will you see us out?
On behalf of Aiden Bear, Ted Kosh, and REIA Radio, I'm Owen Dashner, and you've been listening to Rich. You don't chase the squirrel, you shoot it. Lennon signing off.
Tom's a great guy.
Yeah,
Rich is on because of Tom.
So you
Owen,
I heard you. I'm ignoring you.
Radio edit.
What? I'm not deaf.
I'll radio
I'm
it
just
out.
old, man. I'm not
radio
deaf.
I'll radio it out.
Cool. All right, Ted's back from makeup, and
Looking good.
Gotta get those wrinkles out.
they're still working on mine. There may be a belt sander.
See,
involved.
I don't just bash on him. He bashes on himself just fine.
It's a preemptive strike.